Amy,
I think she's.
what's the official time? Is it 2:30? In about 30 seconds on my watch.
Somebody's got a hot date. You can always tell when there's a hot date. It's like, hey, round them up, people. Let's go. I got somewhere to be.
I don't have anywhere to be, but I don't want to take up their time. These people are important and they have things to do, and these are the workers. Hey, you're the elected. They're the workers, and they have work to do.
That's true.
So I don't want to hold them up. Hey, it's 2:30. It is December 14th, and I'll call to order the SRTA board meeting. And item 2. I think we're good to go here. Our flag is there, and Mr. Gallagher is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You all stand, please.
Our 2 other electeds are right outside.
Silence our phones while we do that. How about we salute and pledge? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And who's doing the staff introductions? Is that going to be you, Sean? Or are we going to do it?
Yes, Chair. Everyone can hear me just fine?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm not there. I have been under the weather this week and don't want to get everyone else sick, so I am attending remotely. Hope to see you all in person at the next meeting. In terms of staff, we have Administrative Associate Amy Lindsay and Associate Transportation Planner Michael Cooker helping run the meeting today. And then the rest of the staff, our CFO, Jessica Carlson, Senior Transportation Planners, Keith Williams and Jennifer Pollum, Associate Transportation Planner, Mehdi Monadani, and Assistant Transportation Planner, Laurent Beauregard are all here today.
Great. Hey, Amy, can you do a roll call, please, for the board?
Yep. Good afternoon, SRTA board members. We'll start with a roll call. Board member Audette.
Here.
Board member Fry.
Present. Greg.
Board member Gallagher.
Here.
Board member Jones.
Here.
Board member Kellstrom.
Here.
Board member Mazzano.
Here.
And board member Watkins.
Here.
Great, thank
Hey,
you.
thank you all. All right. Item number 5, Sean, you're going to do a presentation.
Okay, I think I cut out there. Are we on item?
Item
Number
5, your presentation.
All right, thank you. I will do a quick introduction here, and then actually I'm going to hand this off to John Ando and his consultant. The last time in which we had a presentation was about 7 years ago, where RABA presented during their development of their last short-range transit plan. RABA has been in the process of developing a draft plan over the last 18 months, and we thought this would be a good time, now that they have the draft plan available, for them to present to the board so that you can hear about what they're proposing over the next 5 to 7 years and be able to review and provide comments from the perspective of being on the Regional Transportation Agency Board. As I know also a number of you also sit on RABA's board and we'll look at that from a different perspective during that meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand over the presentation to RABA Transit Manager John Ando and their consultant Claire Hutchinson of LSC Transportation.
Good afternoon, board members. John Ando from RABA. We have Claire from LSC, and she's going to give you a brief presentation on the draft short-range transit plan. This will be presented at the RABA Board of Directors meeting also on Monday, and then we intend to release it to the public for 30 days to get feedback, and we'll be seeking RABA board adoption at the January 22nd, 2024 meeting. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be presenting to you all today. I am just one of the team who has been working on the short-range transit plan. As Sean mentioned, this is a long process. I'm going to try to keep this presentation as concise as possible and feel free to pause or let me know if you have questions, but we can also hopefully focus on taking questions at the end. And let me share my screen. All right, so we are at the point in this study process where we have completed the RABA draft short range transit plan, which means we do have a complete product ready for review. As John mentioned, this is not final until board adoption in January. But what goes into the short range transit plan? The first portion of this plan evaluates existing conditions in the RABA service area in Shasta County, such as population trends, issues with transit performance, and other conditions which affect transit demand and transit performance. Obviously, in recent years, a huge factor impacting transit has been COVID-19 pandemic. But there are also other issues and trends such as California's aging population and changing population centers. That was completed last year, that review of the existing conditions. We then looked at developing potential solutions to address issues that came up during that initial analysis. That work was completed in the spring of this year for the RABA urban service area. And then we also looked at expanding RABA services to include more rural Shasta County outside of the traditional service area. That analysis was completed this fall. We are now at this final stage where we have compiled all of our work into a 5-year business plan that outlines service recommendations, capital needs, and the funding for RABA for the next 5 years. That has been compiled into a draft, and then the final will be adopted in January. The study goals for this, we were hoping to right-size transit services for a challenging time post-COVID and for a unique service area. Evaluate service options that address passenger concerns, passenger needs, and changing travel patterns, especially post-COVID. And then develop innovative solutions that use RABA's funding as best as possible, especially given limited transit funds. But more concisely, we wanted to improve service reliability, provide more direct service wherever possible between common origins and destinations, reduce passenger travel time wherever possible, maximize our cost efficiency of the service, and increase convenience for RABA passengers. This slide is the briefest summary of existing conditions, but in general, urban areas in Shasta County are growing faster than the rural areas. Within the current RABA service area, Redding has a higher proportion of elderly, persons with disabilities, and persons in poverty compared to the rest of California, which indicates a likely need for transit services. This figure shows a transit needs index for the RABA service area. The areas with the greater need for transit based on demographic factors are shown in dark green. Most of these are in downtown Redding or the central Redding area. And these areas are all already currently served by RABA services, which does show that we are meeting needs. RABA overview. There are 11 local fixed routes within Redding and connecting to Shasta Lake and Anderson. Most of these routes operate on hourly headways. The general service hours are 5:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. on weekdays, 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. on Saturdays. Sunday service in Shasta County is provided by Shasta Connect with the Sunday on demand. RABA also operates the Anderson commuter route as well as the school express service. And it used to operate the Crosstown Express as its own service. There's obviously also paratransit within the RABA service area. Other related services obviously operated by RABA are the Bernie Express, which goes up to State Route 299 all the way up to Bernie, and then the Beach Bus, which goes over to the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area. So this existing conditions work reviewed fixed route ridership in particular. This graph shows fixed route ridership on the RABA system, as well as paratransit for the last like 10 to 12 years. Fixed route ridership was actually decreasing pre-pandemic, but the pandemic greatly exacerbated that trend. The routes 11 and 14 have consistently been RABA's best performing routes, meaning they carry the most passenger trips per hour. And then prior to the pandemic, or in recent years, Route 6, Route 9, and Route 18 have been the least efficient. Route 18 being the Crosstown Express with the new naming system. We have collected a lot of public input throughout our development of this plan. I was in the area last summer working on an onboard passenger survey. So I was there for a week. We got input from a few hundred passengers. Last fall, we also conducted online community survey of the general public, advertised through local media outlets, as well as a survey specifically of Shasta College students, because the onboard passenger survey was conducted in the summer and we missed that key demographic group. LSC conducted stakeholder interviews with many people, some of whom I believe are in the room. We also held a community workshop and pop-up events in both November of 2022 and May of this year. And then before analyzing potential rural service alternatives, we did conduct as well an onboard survey on the Boerne Express, and then an online survey targeted at the communities of Boerne, Mountain Gate, and Johnson Park, all up along State Route 299. So that work brought us to how could we improve performance, improve passenger satisfaction. Our study team evaluated different types of alternatives. We looked at reducing the fixed route lengths to improve on-time performance. We also looked at realigning routes to eliminate poor performing segments. We looked at introducing microtransit to the region on a greater scale than just the Sunday service, or having RABA implement its first microtransit service. We looked at changing the span of service or changing the hours and days services are available. We looked at new rural options. And then there are these management options, needed capital improvements, fare changes, and marketing strategies. Microtransit, you all, I think, are more familiar with how this works compared to many, but microtransit applies the ride network technology like used by Lyft and Uber for public transit. So people are able to download an app on their phone and request a ride from the public transit provider. People are also able to call if that is needed for accessibility reasons. And through the app, you can request a ride within your allotted zone or to and from a transit hub where you can connect to another service that can bring you to a different zone. The objective of microtransit is to provide rides within 15 to 30 minutes. Accessible vehicles are needed in order to serve ADA passengers. And key benefits are that it can provide more direct service than fixed routes. It can reach new passengers who are potentially not willing to use the existing fixed route service or who are unable to. And then it's small vans are used for this type of service, which means you can actually go down residential streets, which is obviously not feasible with large 40-foot buses. And microtransit has seen a lot of popularity in recent years, especially since COVID, including around the state. And there have been many other municipalities that have implemented services since we started this study and in the last 6 months even. So that data will all continue to be coming out in the next year or so. So our recommended urban service plan, this is focused specifically on the existing RABA service area. It's a long list, so I apologize, but I'm going to try to keep it straightforward. The map on the left is showing this recommended service plan. There are some first modifications to the fixed routes that already are operating. One component is extending Route 1 to the downtown transit center and then trimming the service a little bit in order to make that time work. The service that is being trimmed will still, those areas are still going to be served with this new microtransit zone up in Shasta Lake and Route 7. So very few homes, if any, are losing service, but Route 1 will instead go to the downtown transit center as part of the objective to no longer serve the Masonic Transfer Center, but that will be discussed more. Route 2 is going to be eliminated, including 2 West and 2 East. Instead being replaced with that orange central microtransit zone that encompasses the Route 2 service area in downtown. Route 3 will be shortened and streamlined. There's going to be evening microtransit service in the urban service area, as well as Sunday service. Routes 4 and 5 are going to be combined to serve the eastern part of Reading, as well as the new Costco. Areas that have currently been served by those routes that are going to lose service due to those being combined and streamlined will have microtransit available to them. And then, as noted, there will be higher service frequency during peak periods. Route 6 is going to be eliminated, but those areas will still be served by this East microtransit zone, which is the blue one, as well as a revised Route 7. Route 7 is going to serve a little bit of the portion of Route 1 that has been trimmed, as well as I'm realizing my text is cut off, so excuse me. And then it's going to be modified to serve Canby rather than the downtown transit center. Route 9 is going to be extended to the downtown transit center. However, some areas of Route 9 are going to be streamlined and instead served with the Anderson microtransit zone, which is shown in green. The Anderson commuter is going to be eliminated and instead replaced with additional Route 9 service. As some of you or all of you already know, John recently implemented a new airport express service, Route 15. So that will continue to be implemented with the service plan, the Flex Routes 1518, which encompasses the Airport Express and the previous Crosstown Express service. The School Express is going to provide more runs and serve more schools, including Shasta View Drive. And then RABA will also be pursuing micro-mobility programs such as bike shares, van pools to implement within Reading and the urban service area. I will keep. This brings us to the rural service plan. This graphic is a little outdated, but I'll specify where in a moment. One component of the rural service plan is RABA is going to begin providing a Shingletown Express service, 2 runs a day for 5 days a week. This will be a demonstration basis, depending on ridership, will determine whether or not the service continues in the future. RABA will also begin providing a Cottonwood Happy Valley microtransit service. So this map only shows it being in Cottonwood, but the service will also include Happy Valley on a demonstration basis, 2 days a week. That will be implemented as an extension of this Anderson microtransit zone, allowing passengers from Cottonwood and Happy Valley to get to Anderson and thus transfer to other services up to Reading. RABA is going to partner with Trinity Transit with a partial fare subsidy agreement and focused marketing, because Trinity Transit is operating a rather successful route from Weaverville along 299 Whiskeytown Lake area into Reading. So no need to repeat their effort, but it would be great to have more people take advantage of it. And there are no changes at this time recommended to the Bernie Express or the beach bus, so routes 19 or 299. So opens. Sorry. Okay. So those were the two service plans focusing on the rural areas and the urban area. The short range transit plan also includes a capital plan. A big thing, right, has been the idea of how can we better use our buses for the space of the roads and the number of passengers being carried. The plan is recommending that the number of routes operated with full-size buses be decreased to only 5. The other routes could be operated with mid-size buses or vans. RABA is going to need to purchase 7 zero-emission full-size buses, 16 zero-emission cutaways, and 8 zero-emission microtransit vans in the next 5 years. Other capital improvements include improving the downtown transit center, improving the Canby Transit Center, eliminating the Masonic Transit Center, eliminating unused and redundant bus stops that are no longer going to be needed. For instance, in the previous Route 2 stops that are now going to be served with microtransit. Improving the operations center, especially to accommodate these new zero-emission buses and alternative fueled vehicles, and other bus technology improvements on board. There are fare recommendations. The fares are going to change slightly with the goal of simplifying fares. The base general urban fixed route fare is going to be increased to $2, but that's also going to simplify because there's going to only be one service zone and unlimited transfers for 2 hours. The paratransit fare is going to be increased slightly. Reduced fares are going to be applied to the entire RABA service area. We're going to introduce a new day pass for $4 and eliminate the punch pass product. Expand the monthly pass to include all of the RABA service area and convert it to be 30 days. Make the youth pass free. The paratransit. Okay, that's a misnomer because of and also RABA is going to be introducing contactless fare payment. The note down here being that fares were last increased in 2006, and with inflation, that would mean that the base fixed route fare in the urban area would be $2.30. So $2 is still below the rate of inflation, and it would be the first increase in 17 years, or almost 18 years at this point. But overall, this will simplify fares, and is expected to have minimal to no impact on ridership, if anything, increase ridership. The plan includes marketing recommendations, with the key ideas being to maintain our base of riders, as well as try to encourage new folks to try RABA, especially post-pandemic. So the plan lists strategies such as website improvements, conducting live events to promote the transit system, and promoting the system on social media and maintaining a strong social media presence, and then ensuring that community organizations have up-to-date rider information to provide to folks, and that people have access to printed information when they need. And the last component, management plan. Sorry for the very small text on here, but the management plan recommends considering integrating the Bernie Express into RABA. Currently, the Bernie Express is a County of Shasta service that RABA is operating under contract. By having RABA operate the service itself, it frees up county public works staff to do other functions. It eliminates some duplicative reporting, eliminates duplicative invoicing, and it also allows RABA to directly apply for rural funds and to spend down this $1.6 million of COVID-19 rural funding. It also helps to just increase the cohesiveness of the Shasta County transit system. Another recommendation is consider shifting the Sunday Shasta Connect service to RABA as part of its rolling out of microtransit. And then just consider integrating Shasta Connect into RABA. Under this recommendation, Shasta Connect would continue to be provided under the Dignity Health contract. But we believe that if they were all operated under one brand, Shasta Connect and RABA, it would increase public awareness of the services Shasta Connect offers. There's the potential to consolidate and increase vehicle sharing. Yes, and then allows vehicle sharing between the two fleets, so an overall smaller fleet, easier integration of technologies, and then also would allow both like Dignity Health and Certif staff to have more time to do other functions. And then the final aspect of the management plan is adopt updated goals and performance measures. COVID has changed things, new funding has changed the importance of Farebox, so we have recommended new performance standards to evaluate RABA services, as well as some of these new pilots being rolled out on a demonstration basis. And if services are not meeting standards, they likely should not continue. So this financial plan, urban service costs are going to increase by 14%. Rural service costs are going to increase by 44%, excluding any consideration of Shasta Connect. Ridership would increase by 32% in the urban area and 73% on the rural area, which would allow for additional fare revenue. And then, yes, there are efforts underway to this new SB 125 TIRCP funds. So these are going to be available for the first 4 years of the plan to help fund operations. The future of the TIRCP funding is not certain at this time. However, the state is working on trying to extend this new funding source that's being used in this plan. But overall, there is more than enough money to fund the service plan presented during the next 5 years. And it will help spend down that 1.6 million of funding that's available, and it is set to expire by 2026. So yeah, capital costs are big. Obviously, zero emission vehicles cost a lot, so that will be a huge chunk of capital funding. Bus stop improvements to our transit centers. So in all, the capital costs are going to cost around 20.6 million over the 5 years. But we also, as seen on the right, have enough fare revenues to cover these costs from FTA 5339, State of Good Repair, TIRCP, and LC Top and TDA funding. So the last slide, in summary, we believe that this service plan helps tailor RABA services to better meet current needs in 2023 going on 2024. It would increase RABA ridership. It helps streamline and shorten routes and improve operation efficiency. We're expanding service to serve new areas of the county and of the service area, including extending rural services to Cottonwood, Happy Valley, and Shingletown. This plan incorporates new technologies to help with fare collection and provide real-time information, as well as provide on-demand services. The recommendations, especially in terms of management, would help create a more cohesive region-wide brand for the public transit in the county, and then helps maximize this funding that is available in these next 5 years to really improve the transit system, especially while it's available for limited funding such as COVID funds. And that was a lot. So I will open the floor to questions, but I put up my information and John's on here because I know the plan is huge. It covers a lot of ground. You have the ability to read the draft plan as well as the previous reports, but if you have specific questions that you can't think of right now, please email me or John, and we will try our best to answer, as well as for comments that you may have. So with that, I will return it to you all.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Kellstrom here. You brought a route down to Cottonwood a few years ago and it was not received very well at all. In fact, the townsfolk down there raised such a fuss, they ended up pulling the route back out of Cottonwood. So I'm just wondering, why are we expanding to Cottonwood again?
Sorry, I'm pausing because I didn't know if John's going to answer, and thus is the issue of me being virtual.
You can answer and then I can add a comment.
Okay. Actually, the Tehama public transit system TRAX has started operating a rather successful route from Red Bluff to
Right.
Cottonwood that has seen we as consultants, right, look at a lot of different transit systems. Tehama is kind of interesting in that they've actually met their pre-COVID ridership levels last year. So one of their big successes has been this route. Cottonwood has the population enough to merit implementing service. This is a different service model than was done in the past. And also it would help people who are going from Red Bluff to Cottonwood if they desire to get further up the system to the Reading area. But if John wants to add anything.
Yeah, so basically, Shasta Connect's already serving Cottonwood with demand response, small vans.
Okay.
It'll basically be that exact service, not going to the big bus that used to come down, stop at a bus stop, and people go to a common point. So if people want service in Cottonwood, they would just go on the app, mention that they want to be picked up, the van will pick them up, and then take them anywhere within that Cottonwood, Happy Valley, Anderson zone.
Okay, and you have that service now?
Currently, Shasta Connect's providing that service.
Okay, and how many riders are they getting? Do you have any idea?
At this point, that is correct that with the CTSA and expanded CTSA specialized rural transit, we have that service. We don't have those numbers specifically about that service area, but that is something we can ask the software provider to provide some updated data on as part of the analysis and review. And that is correct that there was a effort several years ago to try something based upon community feedback. We did identify a few individuals that were using the service regularly, especially for Connection Shasta College. And when that service discontinued, we did find alternatives for those individuals at the time that were living out there. And that is, one item that we look at in review of the plan and talk with John and his staff and the consultant is going over these items. And we've had a couple discussions with them as well to make sure also that we're careful and cognizant of not having duplicative services, or if something's already existing, any additions to that. We think about the appropriate way to handle those. So our staff is also reviewing these and will be working and continue to work with RABA on different proposed ideas.
Okay, so and there will be a 30-day public comment period before it's approved?
Yes.
Okay, so you will probably get several comments from Cottonwood, and I don't think too many may be too positive, but maybe I'm wrong. Good luck.
Cottonwood folk rather go to Red Bluff than Reading.
It'll be as well received as the cattle project was, yeah.
I want people from Reading coming down to Cottonwood.
There you go.
That's what it is. Well, no, I mean,
Can I ask
Yeah.
a clarifying question?
Are there any other questions from the board?
I had a question.
Chris,
Chair recognizes Ms. Audette.
I'm gonna pack that van.
When you talk about the microtransit, they're taking them to a fixed route? That's where they take them, or do they take them to the destination that they want to go to?
If they're traveling within the zone, they can go direct within the zone.
Okay,
If they want to leave the zone, then they'll be taken to a common spot to where they can catch a fixed route to then travel to other areas.
okay, thanks.
Other questions from the board? Is there any public comment on this presentation? Seeing none, I'm not going to read it. We're going to move on. Thank you for the presentation. This information only requires no vote. We'll move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine. Will be acted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the agency votes on the motion to approve. Have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
So move to second.
I'll second.
Second. Amy, Mr. Jones made the motion and Ms. Audette seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Move on to the regular calendar. That'll be item number 8, the Executive Director's Report. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, can you hear me again? It looks like I cut out there briefly.
We can hear you. Is that a gaming headset? Is that what you're wearing there? Are you like a gamer?
Seems like
Yeah,
the
this is
sports
one I
people
have
that-
for home. Yes, for different stuff. It also helps so you don't hear my 5 and 8-year-old as they run around the house and everything as well. So hopefully keeps it a little quieter there. On my director's report, I just have 3 very brief items I wanted to mention. Since the last meeting, SRTA did host with sponsorship by the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership on November 2nd. We hosted an educational and informational workshop related to hydrogen fuel cell technologies and a discussion about advanced clean fleet rules and innovative clean transit regulations and the impact those have on our various agencies, including our fleet departments, transit departments, and different utilities as well in the region. It was a very informative session. We had roughly 50 participants from folks in local government, utilities, economic development, local law enforcement, and Shasta College. I was very thankful and want to thank everyone here and those listening that participate in those sessions, as they were not only educational, but they did help initiate some discussions about the challenges that we have in the region, the opportunities that might exist, as well as ways in which SRTA could potentially support the region. Some key challenges we did identify at the end of the day was around areas of funding, vehicle availability, reliability, timing, especially in terms of various regulations and the capacity of organizations, as well as challenges with workforce development, both in training existing employees as well as future employees. So it's a good discussion. We were happy to have that. It was great to see all the folks there, and we'll be able to continue to use that communication group to stay in touch on various opportunities. And one thing I'm looking at in next year, early next year, is potentially having a presentation from Reading Electric Utility on their update on their utility rates and also their updating of their impact of the electrification of transportation on the utilities themselves to understand how that plays into our future planning. The other item that we had was Caltrans District 2 on November 15th hosted an open house on a fixed 5 Cascade Gateway project. That was an opportunity for them to present on updates to the project now that it is fully funded for construction, including being able to initiate an updated EIR review process since there were a few changes the last time that the EIR was out previously. I attended, and I know that a couple of board members, including board member Watkins and Audette, were there. So we had a good discussion with engineers, more familiar with the ins and outs of the project. It was an open house format. I know we had also a couple other state legislative representatives there as well to learn about the project and to thank them also for their support throughout it. And we're anticipating being able to continue our support with Caltrans to request programming of funds in the spring of 2024 to stick with their estimated construction schedule. The one other item, which I'm sure is going to be a hot topic over the next few months, and I'm sure a number of you have probably seen it in the news, is related to the state budget. If you have seen the news yet, I know there's a lot of news articles today and the last week. The State Legislative Analyst Office had released a report ahead of the governor's deadline to submit a draft budget in early January 2024. They estimated there's the potential for a 68 billion, that is with a B, deficit across all programs and all departments statewide for fiscal year 24-25. In terms of transportation, there really was not much detail there, so there's not a whole lot to report at this point. It's too early to tell how and where there may be impacts. The report at a very high level just suggested a 2.2 billion reduction in one-time funds in 24-25, but which programs that was associated with was not available. And we've yet to see any DVRO reports on this, as well as how it compares to forecasts that were provided earlier this year by Caltrans's budget office that gives regular updates during the California Transportation Commission meetings. I know in the past meetings this year, the Caltrans budget team had been presenting funding updates, and they utilized Department of Finance data. They have recognized that in the future, we are anticipating to see decreases in fuel consumption, and that has been already happening. But they've also recognized that due to the allowance of annual consumer price index increases allowed on the fuel taxes under SB1, that for a period of time, the potential increases that can be approved would exceed the fuel revenue sales decline. However, they have indicated that we could see concerns about this difference in fuel purchasing versus revenue around fiscal year 27, 28, 28, 29. This is an item of strong interest, I know, to everyone. We'll continue to monitor and we'll report back when there are updates available. That's all I have for my report for today.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody have any questions for Sean on that report? Let's move on to item 9. That's the CERTA board members report on attendance at conferences and meetings reimbursed at CERTA's expense. Has anybody on the board gone to a meeting or conference that CERTA is paying for?
No.
Let's move on. Item number 10. Jennifer, present on our sustainable community strategy. Yes.
I believe I should be able to share my screen
You gotta hit the green share button on the side.
on the Zoom.
You should be able to.
Got it. Thank you.
Nice, it's over there, by the way.
Yeah.
Played, nicely done.
There we go. All right. Excellent. And thank you, board members. Today I am presenting on the agenda item number 10. It's the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues that have assisted with this. All of them in some way or form have, but specifically my colleague Wendy has been working with me closely on the project, and we have our consultant here from eCorp. He drove up from Chico, it's Seth Myers, and he has worked on the EIR, Environmental Impact Report. So as CERTA is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization and the state designated rural transportation planning agency, we are required to develop a 20-year transportation plan called the Regional Transportation Plan. It is a fundamental piece of work that CERTA does, similar to our overall work program and our transportation improvement programs. This plan is updated every 4 years, which is a comprehensive, cooperative, and continuing planning effort with our partners from Caltrans, the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Highway Administration, the 3 cities, Anderson. In my head. Don't you want to be incorporated?
No.
City of Shasta Lake and the city of Reading, with our local tribal governments, and with federal land management agencies such as the Park Service, Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and others. There are 4 parts. I want to keep this clear. There's 4 parts to the staff recommendation. The first thing is after my presentation, we're going to conduct a public hearing. That is requirement of the Sustainable Community Strategy. The second recommendation is the meat of the matter, because it certifies the final supplemental environmental impact report, which accepts the statements of overriding consideration, adopts a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and finally approves the regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy. That's the meat. Third is also of significance. It adopts our travel demand model. We up to now and what we have under consideration, or what we have adopted right now, ShastaSIM 2. This regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy was developed using a new model called ShastaSIM 2.0. So resolution 2316 will approve that. And finally, the last recommendation is to authorize the executive director to make minor modifications based on federal and state review and feedback. First off, about the sustainable communities strategy. This is a sustainable community strategy is a coordinated land use and transportation plan, illustrating how this region, Shasta County, will meet our Senate Bill 375 targets to reduce per capita greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicles and light trucks. Based on the strategies that we've included in our sustainable community strategy, the region is projected to meet our target of a 4% reduction by 2035. You can see here that based on the modeling, we will have a 12.94% reduction in per capita greenhouse gas emissions based on passenger vehicles and light trucks. Second, the final supplemental environmental impact report, I do have copies up here. It is a requirement of a plan such as this. It did identify significant and unavoidable impacts, so the board of directors must weigh the benefits of the regional transportation plan against any unavoidable environmental risks. To assist the board with this determination, we have statements of overriding consideration, which are summarized in table 2 of the staff report. Now back kind of to the meat of the actual plan itself, the regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy. We are approximating $3.7 billion in revenue that's anticipated for the Shasta region for that 20-year horizon. That's for transportation infrastructure, including highways, streets and roads, interchanges, bridges, public transit, rail, bike and pedestrian, recreation, and aviation, land level aviation, as well as travel demand management and transportation system management. Resolution 2316 addresses ShastaSIM 2.0. So CERTA develops and maintains a regional travel demand model, which forecasts land use and corresponding travel behavior for at least 20 years into the future. It is an important tool used for a variety of planning and programming activities at the agency. Through the modeling, CERTA can estimate future traffic volumes, identify potential congestion points, evaluate traffic impacts related to future development projects and policies, and calculate related vehicle emissions. Again, I wanted to return back to our staff recommendations so that you're understanding that there are 4 in front of you, and then I'm going to ask that the chair open a public hearing.
So moved. Public hearing is now open. Amy, do you have anybody online?
I do not.
Are you here to comment, sir?
I do not.
Okay.
Nor do I.
No comment. We'll close the public hearing. Now we take this in steps here, folks. Adopt resolution 23.15. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt resolution 23.15, certifying the final SEIR.
Can I butt in on your
Yeah.
process first? Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
So I've had a problem with the modeling thing in the past, and you're well aware of that. So there's so many variables that I think I'd like to just test the air personally, see where we're at, see if we're actually reducing greenhouse gases or not. But that's not going to happen. So it's just a pipe dream of mine, I realize. But I have a question because it says, so in a couple places it says we are on track to meet the targets for 2020 based on actual observed data rather than modeled and estimation. Sort of utilized multiple sources, including streetlight, HPMS, and SB 150 data, and estimation derived from SB 150 data revealed a 4.3 reduction in total greenhouse emissions in 2020. That's your note on 2020, and then 2035 doesn't have notes, but it's saying we're going to meet the targets. But at the end of the first half, behind the second resolution, we have a letter from CARB. I'll withhold my comments on CARB to say that I'm just going to read the paragraph for the public. This work is more important than ever. CARB's second SB 150 progress report, with one note, you can go find it online, shows that California as a whole and the Shasta region are not on track to meet the greenhouse gas emission reductions expected under Senate Bill SB 375, and that vehicle miles traveled is increasing. Governor Newsom signed Executive Order N 1919 to redouble the state's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, explicitly focusing on lowering vehicle miles traveled. So are we worried about greenhouse gases or vehicle miles traveled? My conspiracy theorist in me would tell you it's more about vehicle miles traveled than greenhouse gases every day of the week. But I understand that they're going to use greenhouse gas as their attack point. So I guess I understand they use both, right? They're using vehicle miles traveled to make a calculation. But is there a discrepancy, or is there not, between the letter from CARB on October 11th and what we see in our graph?
So,
Am I just missing something here?
no, from the prior to October 11th, we were gonna be meeting the 2020 target, what you're seeing there. Using the AB 150 data, but what they're saying is projected to 2035 and beyond, that we're not gonna be meeting the targets.
But our graph says we're gonna hit it in 2035 with a negative 12.94% decrease.
Correct, and that's what
So
this is a new plan that we're presenting to them.
this is the new version. Okay.
Our version.
If I
These are the goalposts moving.
Sean, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah, if I
think
can
that's what
interject.
I'm getting at, Kevin. I wasn't gonna rush into that, but yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean, they moved the line is what they did. Is that fair to say?
yes. Well,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things. Yes, they're always evaluating. They, being CARB, is always evaluating. They're allowed to evaluate about every 4 years. The statement within their letter is based upon the SB 150 report that CARB said as a whole, and they only call it the Shasta region because it's a letter to the Shasta region, that CARB is concerned that what they are seeing is the fact that they're saying we've already returned to vehicle miles traveled levels prior to COVID at the current point where things are at. So their concern is that if the same trends continue statewide, that VMT will continue to increase, thereby the vehicle we use as a measure, pun intended, to estimate greenhouse gas emissions is related to vehicle miles traveled. The thing that they don't happen to mention in their letter is the fact that part of their SB 150 report and a number of measures identified some 50 plus different strategies, of which a majority of those are state responsibility. And that they don't mention in this letter that regions as a whole, being the metropolitan planning organizations across the state, are trying to do everything that they can. A lot of it is a modeling exercise and is based upon a variety of assumptions which are built into each plan. And there could be any number of circumstances that happen that totally upend that estimated projection. So the best that we can say is if with this plan, if all of these things were to happen as we are trying to estimate how to hit a target, then we project we might hit that target. Now, whether or not we do, time will tell.
Oh my. John. John.
Great work, the team. Well done. I mean, this is a lot of work. It represents a tremendous amount of effort. So
If there's one question, I'd be happy to address it. I
The
just
right
was getting
answer.
confused between
Yeah,
these.
sorry. So That's probably all I have.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I was asking our attorney if he was impressed by the way Sean answered that in such a eloquent, spinning it around.
Move on.
Yeah.
Well, it's just unfortunate.
I'm okay with your comments.
Because you're
Okay.
forced to shoot at a moving target.
Yeah.
I understand that. I guess I'm just struggling with that. When I read the letter, it's like, oh, are you threatening us here in Shasta County? Because
Yeah.
what's the letter that San Francisco got? Or how about LA County? Like, are they meeting their targets? Or are we jumping through a bunch of hoops and because what they don't want, because we're rural, they want us to lock down in our, they want Mary to stay out in Millville or out in that area. They don't want her driving in every day. They don't want us driving where we go, but everybody in this county drives. Everybody in this county drives, right? So there's this, or almost everybody, let me clarify, almost everybody in our county drives. And so when we throw in this vehicle miles traveled as part of the criteria, then there's a motive behind that. They have a motive. And that's probably what my job is to make us aware that there is a motive behind that. And it's less about greenhouse gases yeah. So with that, Chair,
Greg?
that's probably, you answered my question. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
Greg, I also read this 7-page letter, and it is quite hostile to SRTA and the work you've done. And I see that came on October 11th. You went back, it looks like, and tried to address some of those points. But this Casey Neck, the chief of CARB, really didn't play fair in his letter because he's saying, here you made 6 lanes from Anderson or from Cottonwood all the way to Reading, and that increased vehicle miles traveled, but we were playing under different rules then, and yet he attacks that. So I just think that it just kind of points out that there are zealots in Sacramento who don't want to play by their own rules that they set up for us to follow. So it's interesting that you included that letter in here, and I appreciate you putting it in.
To address that about the dates of the letter, we were supposed to come to this board in October with all of this whole recommendation. We had to go back to the drawing board because of this letter. Not fully, but we made some changes.
Well, they changed the rules and we've got to adjust. That's unfortunate.
Do we?
Well,
I mean, I'm asking, this is a hearing, it's a dialogue, like, do we?
So if I could add to that, one of the things that we run into is that post-adoption here at the board on the RTP, we then must submit all of the documents, and CARB has an opportunity to review this still yet again one more time within several months to provide a final comment letter that says if they believe what we have presented in this RTP, that we might meet the target. So we still have one more effort to have to go through post-adoption of this. It does just also go through a federal highway and Caltrans review, but the critical item is we staff, and I want to commend them for the work that they've done over the last couple of months to try to address the CARB letter, is that we believe we have addressed most of their comments in a way that was either for clarification or providing information they needed to review, that we hope to have a positive outcome that CARB will agree with the results of the RTP as it's presented based upon the data and the projections at this point.
how do you feel about that? You did it.
I'm actually quite proud of the work that we've done.
Yeah.
If you look at historically what you've seen, we've got Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities grants in 2 of our cities. We are increasing bike and ped. Like, it's a slow process, but we are trying to do the things that we are stating we're going to be trying to do. So I think that that's the best that we can do. And we are showing that we're meeting our targets. And we're meeting them excessively. Our target is a -4. We're by 2035 showing a -12. So we're on track. And I don't think that they're gonna have much more to question once we've turned the final draft.
Good, good.
How do vehicle miles travels for EVs count? They're talking just vehicle miles travel of vehicles, but some of them can't be counting like EVs, so.
So it is modeling and all those things are, so the fleet are our fleets, not fleet as in vehicles owned by the government, but the Shasta County passenger vehicles and light truck fleet is considered, and a certain percentage of that is EV. So they take that into consideration in the modeling.
Well, I'm fine with them counting vehicle miles traveled for them, and they ought to tax them on their license fee because they're not paying the gas tax to help repair the roads.
They are, so there is $100 fee.
Oh, 100, you know how much I pay? 100 gallons of gas here is $100 in a year. So I bet I'm paying $1,000 a year.
I'm sure that is something.
Well, they're giving them a break on the electric because they're not polluting.
Yeah, because, yeah.
All right.
The math
All right.
doesn't add up, and we all know it. We really don't ever want to admit it.
Do you want us
So
to make a motion for
there's
the
that.
whole thing or just the one thing, Chair? Do you want to go one by one or do you want to do the whole thing?
I don't care. We can do it all at once. Everybody's okay with that?
Pass.
I'll entertain the motion to approve items 2,
John, can we
3,
do that
and
as one?
4.
No, what,
Can we do that as one?
yeah, you could do it, but it's listed as two actions on the agenda. You could do it one motion. You can take two actions with one motion.
All right, so the chair will entertain a motion, please.
I'll entertain that motion. I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, Amy, Ms. Audette made the motion and it was seconded by Chris Kelstrom. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, Amy.
Thank you.
Jennifer. Easy. It's a lot of work, man. Just crazy amount of work. And, you know, at the last minute, they should give you another 2 weeks or 3 weeks worth of work. Why wouldn't they? Thank you, Carb,
That's the next
you
year.
unelected bureaucrats. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Said that out loud.
But wait,
Okay, let's move on to item 11. To conduct a public hearing and approve the Shasta 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, RTIP. And that's you, Sean.
That is correct. That will be me. I'll try to be brief on this. If you've seen most of this at our October meeting, and there's been very little change. A couple updates I did want to mention is we did update the amount for estimated new programming capacity. Between after the last meeting, I did receive a notice from CTC staff, that are the programming folks, that they did realize that there was a slight error in which the total programming amount available for the region for this programming cycle was about 150,000 less. And that just meant that we still had up to 7.17 million in new programming capacity for this 2024 RTIP cycle. In terms of the projects, which are described again throughout, no change on the PPM money that we utilize for preparing RTIPs and also for some grant match. There, in the end, after discussions with Caltrans on Fixed Cascade Gateway, I am recommending that the board approve setting aside $3.5 million within the 2024 RTIP for our regional shares for other unanticipated costs that may impact CERTA's contribution toward the project. Again, that's roughly 14% of CERTA's current match to the Fixed Cascade Gateway project for funds we contributed throughout the process. Turtle Bay to downtown, no further funding is recommended for programming, as that money has already been previously programmed for writing and is within their capacity now to just deliver the project. The next two projects, the prior cattle and North Reading active transportation trunk line projects are recommended for removing programming in the RTIP. That means that those two projects were we have provided funding towards will be available for reprogramming during the 2026 RTIP. That is approximately 2.9 million that we have available as part of the 2026 RTIP for programming, as well as the 1.3 million in shares in which we swapped with Tulare County Association of Governments. That will be available for us as well in the 2026 RTIP cycle, 2 years from now. And then no changes to ratings to active transportation projects for the SRTA match that we had, just shy of $1 million for the Victor Improvement Project and just over 806,000 for the Butte Street Boogie project. The one addition to the staff report that I wanted to highlight is with the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project now fully funded for construction, an interagency agreement between SRTA and Caltrans is necessary. The purpose of that agreement is to outline SRTA and Caltrans' responsibilities as co-sponsors for the project, as well as to identify the cost sharing for all the relevant funding mechanisms that were used to fund the project between state funds and regional funds, and then allow us to move forward with that project. So that is an added recommended action here today. All told, with the current programming, even with this adoption, I should add that the RTIP is still technically draft until the CTC goes through their review period, which will happen early next year with a final adoption as part of what we call the State Transportation Improvement Program, which includes the RTIPs from every regional agency. That's anticipated to be fully adopted in March of next year. Overall, we have roughly 10.9 million in prior program funds that are carrying over, as well as 5.7 million in new program money, which is leveraging over 139 million in combined federal, state, regional, and local funds. With that, I will hand it over to the chair for a public hearing to receive any comments and then for approval of the action items.
Thank you, Sean. We're now open to public hearing for this item. Amy, do you have anybody online?
I do not.
Chair Mazzano, I have
Yes.
a request to speak from John Ando.
Okay.
I'm going to, does the chair recognize him?
So recognized.
All right. Go ahead, John.
No, I don't have a comment for this item. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It was for the.
Well, you vanished. Okay.
He's in the bathroom.
With no public comment.
There is.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I have a quick question and, so I saw no mention at all about intercity buses, Salmon Runner at all in the update. So basically, is that program frozen at the last 2 year ago update? Is that what's going on?
In terms of transit, typically transit projects are not programmed as part of the RTIP. Specifically, transit programs are programmed mostly within the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. There is where most of that is handled in terms of programming. That was adopted last year, was our last FTIP that was approved that we adopt every 2 years. We will be relooking at programming for transit projects as part of the FTIP next year. In that process.
So I'm mistaken in that this was not an update of the program I thought it was.
Well, we have two programs. One is the federal set of programs, and then any state or local funds associated with those projects. That's part of the typically FTIP. The RTIP, which is mostly focused on state funds, there are opportunities for transit projects to be included, but at this point and for several RTIP cycles, that has only been common to some of the more larger urbanized regions because they utilize what are called public transportation account funds or PTA funds. And typically the bigger urban areas are the only ones that end up utilizing those. And we've also had a deficit in terms of PTA funds. So typically you will not find transit projects in a RTIP or the state's transportation improvement program. Those are handled within the FTIP or in other programs.
Well, I must be mistaken then. I thought it was this program I discussed when I came here a few months ago, and that was the preliminary program. That was the proposal for this presentation, wasn't it? In any case, I'm sorry, I'm getting bogged down in your proposal. As I understand it, you still have the $8 million in funding for a bus program.
Yes, let me clarify on that one as well. Yes, we still have $8.6 million in funds available for vehicles. We also have still available the $9 million in federal funds that was provided by Caltrans towards a hydrogen fueling station. And in terms of the project, you will see an update and some references to that in the future agenda item on SB 125. We do talk about that a little bit as part of a proposed project. One of the things, just for everyone to know as well, SRTA is in the process of our request for proposals on updates to the bus to rail plan. So that way we can reevaluate the salmon rudder study services that were taking place. But we're still out to bid right now for those. And we anticipate, fingers crossed, if we get proposals, a item for the board for contracting that out in February to move forward. So the idea is not dead. We are still having discussions. So it's proposals for updated study.
For electric and hydrogen, battery and hydrogen.
It's for across the board to look at services in general. So it's also looking at ridership assumptions and other services that exist today that were not around 5-6 years ago when the initial efforts were done. So we're looking at holistically.
I didn't mean to take that long to it. If I have any time, I'll make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I did come here and of course I couldn't respond. When I mentioned that the previous study on the feasibility of electric buses was done by, it was an incompetent study by an unqualified author. I did not use those words pejoratively. They were accurate. No one has followed up, as far as I know, study on the subject since then or looked into it. But I really think that ought to be a priority. In short, you have the funding presently for an effective electric bus line, more or less along the lines of the proposal. You've been sitting on this money for years and nothing has happened. And I just think, again, this is the third or fourth time I've come in the last 5 years, and all I've asked for is for you to look at a feasibility study and get accurate inputs. I don't think really there's any doubt the benefit inexpensive and reliable transportation between Shasta County, the Bay Area, and Sacramento would be. But this is the only proposal out there to do anything about it, and nothing has been happening for a long time now. If you really, I don't know if you had ideological reasons not to want to pursue it, okay. If you've got some reason you have this hydrogen economy fantasy, okay. But that should not preclude you from doing your job of studying, doing an accurate economic analysis of what you have, the funds you have now, and what you can do with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, I'll give you a minute to respond to that as far as updating our position.
Yeah, the only thing I will add to that is that it is still an ongoing effort. We had been moving forward, have been trying to work with the state to move forward. And at one point, they did provide some operating funds. Operating funds were one of the biggest concerns we had, as this board did not want to commit a bunch of our own regional funds just for our region for service that we're going to serve multiple counties across the North State, and looking at options for the state to support the efforts, because the state has said that supporting interregional transportation and bus and rail is a priority of the state. And so we've asked them to say, well, let's see you put some action to that. At one point, we had been provided with funds. We were going to move forward. And at the 11th hour, before we were going to submit a request for proposals for a project manager to move forward, Caltrans headquarters, I should clarify who we're talking about here. Caltrans headquarters upended that, and they pulled away half of the money that we were looking at the time for operational funds. That essentially stopped us from being able to move forward until we could identify something that would work forward. That's where we've been at.
Thank you. Well, no further comment. I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up for board discussion. Apparently there is no discussion on this, so the chair will entertain a motion to approve staff recommendations.
Also move.
We have a first from Mr. Jones, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Kellstrom, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Amy, it's Jones and Kellstrom. It's approved unanimously.
Great, thank you very much.
Aye. Reading. Can't walk and chew bubble gum either.
Okay. Item 12. Approve Senate Bill SB 125 Short-Term Capital Program and this SRTA-RABA interagency agreement. And that is Lawrence.
Michael, are you able to put this up on the screen for me?
Sure, I can do that. One sec.
Thank you.
Chair, if I can, I'll just add one comment as this comes up, is that I want to commend staff for the work they've been doing, as well as working with RABA, Dignity Health Connected Living staff. This has been a short turnaround effort to try to identify funding, the projects for the funding with us, that we just got our guidelines in September, and then trying to take a couple of months really to work through all the different needs. So I want to commend all the different staff of the agencies for partnering to work together to identify how to move forward and how we might allocate some of these funds. And with that, I will let Laurent jump into his presentation.
Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'm Laurent Beauregard, Assistant Transportation Planner here at CERTA. I want to thank the board and the public for your time today. And I will be presenting on agenda item 12. As a reminder, we are looking for approval of the project list for the projects and their amounts. The final short-term allocation package is still getting details worked out pertaining to the quantification methodology, data needs, and narrative content as we ensure the projects stay consistent with California State Transportation Agency guidelines. Next slide, Mark. So just a quick background on where the funding is coming from. We are getting $21.5 million in transit and intercity rail capital program and zero emission transit capital program funds allocated to the Shasta region over the next 4 fiscal years. There is no expenditure deadline of the funds once funds are received, and CalSTA must obligate the funds by June of 2028. Allocation packages may be modified or updated at any time, and updated allocation packages will be reviewed for approval by CalSTA on a 30 to 60 day rolling basis. CalSTA anticipates at least one update to the region's allocation package will be submitted by December of next year or sooner. In coordination with the Reading Area Bus Authority, Dignity Health Connected Living, and CERTA staff, we have identified the list of eligible projects and the initial allocation package detailed in the next couple of slides. Sorry, next slide, Michael. Perfect. The proposed list of projects focuses on needs identified in RABA's draft short-range transit plan, which we just received an update on, CERTA's long-range transit plan, and RABA's and CERTA's zero-emission transition plans, and is influenced by available regional transit operator data. These are just the core project ideas as they stand. Any of them can be elaborated upon if anyone has any questions. So to start, we have the regional ridership retainage and growth, which will be used on transit operations assistance and micromobility partnerships for RABA and DHCL in the total of $4.65 million. Next, we have RABA technology enhancements in the amount of $1.435 million, which will implement and cover the operational costs associated with technology needed to enhance public transit services. Up next is the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency Coordination, or CTSA, in the amount of $500,000, which will conduct a Consolidated Transportation Services Agency transit efficiency and innovation study to evaluate and develop potential implementation steps for migrating CTSA services from CERTA to RABA. Further, we have RABA microtransit operations in the amount of $1.8 million. This includes payments to RABA's transit operations contractor, fuel, preventative maintenance, RABA administrative costs, marketing, and transitional costs associated with the removal of fixed routes 2, 5, 6, portions of 1, 9, and 15 from the RABA system due to micro transit implementation. Continuing with the zero emission vehicle replacements, there's actually a typo in the expansion of the projects in my staff report. It says that RABA is requesting 2 zero emission vans for $1.1 million. The correction is they are requesting 6 for that total. The total for the zero emission vehicle replacements is $4.7 million, which will help with the innovative clean transit required regulation of gradually transitioning to 100% zero emission bus fleets. RABA is requesting 5 electric buses and 6 electric vans, and Dignity Health Connected Living is requesting 1 pilot electric van, which will satisfy recommendation 2 of the Shasta Connect Zero Emission Fleet Transition Rollout Plan. Next is the North State Intercity Passenger Transit System, which is an extension of the North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan, with the goal of improving bus service to nearby existing and planned rail hubs. $100,000 will be used to update the demand study, including research, data collection, and expert consultations, and $1.95 million will be set aside for the lease or purchase of renewable diesel buses to operate the intercity Reading to Chico service in partnership with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. Continuing, we have an expansion of the Cycle 3 competitive transit and intercity rail capital program for the North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan, which requires a match of $1.629 million for the planned hydrogen station on RABA property, and will expand the previous plan to include a hydrogen supply market study and recommendation. Lastly, we have the admin of SB 125 an amount of $215,000, which is allowed maximum of 1% of the total SB 125 funds that we'll be receiving to the region. Go to the next slide, Michael. Thank you. All right, some of the future projects not included in this initial allocation package are the operations and maintenance of salmon runner buses and RABA property improvements and reconfigurations for the hydrogen station. The first project would, those are simple, those have details that need to be worked out and are not, will likely be included in a further allocation package in the future. All right, Sean, did you want to speak on the interagency agreement?
It identifies roles and responsibilities.
Sure, if you can expand it there, but essentially the interagency agreement is something that in discussions with RABA management, we identified as a need as something just to identify roles and responsibilities between the agencies related to the hydrogen fuel cell project. Also, it will serve as a mechanism for SRTA to ask Caltrans to transfer the $9 million in federal grant funds for the station project if we move forward with that project to help fund all of the different project management, design, environmental, construction efforts, and also fuel purchasing as throughout the process. It's about a 7-year agreement right now is what is proposed. Both myself and RABA management have reviewed it, as well as our legal attorneys, and it's being presented for an action item and approval by the board today.
And then as a reminder, the staff recommendation today is for the board to approve and authorize the executive director to submit the Senate Bill SB 125 short-term capital program initial allocation package of projects totaling $17.505 million. Authorize the executive director to make minor administrative amendments as appropriate in response to CalSTA comments, or provide any other necessary information in support of the initial allocation package. Delegate the executive director to execute the necessary agreements with CalSTA to receive funds, and approve and authorize the executive director to execute an interagency agreement between SRTA and RABA for the purpose of jointly developing and building a hydrogen station on property owned by RABA. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Lauren. Questions from the board? Michael?
There is a comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Michael. You're good.
We do have a request to speak from John at RABA.
Go ahead. Chair
Go ahead and
recognizes
unmute.
John.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I just want to thank Sean, Laurent, Mehdi, Jennifer, just for working with us on identifying these project lists, particularly for RABA. This funding will help us in being able to implement the actions of the short-range transit plan, maximize the use of one-time transit-only funding over the course of a 4-year period to sustain our current operations, build ridership, and make our system more productive without impacting the use of traditional transit dollars that support us and other needs in the county. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Gallagher.
You know me so well, Mark. It's good to be known. I think, philosophically, I just have a problem with this whole, we're being forced to go zero emission. So I'm pretty much against it, although we're willing to purchase or lease renewable diesel buses for our yet approved collaboration with San Joaquin. I am a hard pass on building the hydrogen station right now. That's just so. The struggle I have is some of this I understand, but I just can't go there. So I think I'll just tell you I'm going to vote no on this one just mostly because of the hydrogen station, and then I don't like being forced to do things that I don't believe in.
Well.
I agree.
So that's where I'm at, for the record.
Anyone else on the board?
I agree with you, Mike.
I would just add that hydrogen is not a fuel. It is simply like putting electricity in a battery or compressing air to drive a motor later. Hydrogen is not a fuel. And so if CARB would get off their high horse and allow an EV that has a small generator or gas, an EV and diesel, mixed together, it would work. But this is nuts, but we're being forced on it by the state.
Are you voting no then, Greg?
My vote doesn't make any difference on this really, but I think that we ought to just recognize that we're being pushed forward with a program that doesn't, the emperor has no clothes, but we're going forward with it.
And just so I don't, so that I'm just not winging it, I rode a diesel electric ferry in Norway that goes back and forth, and it recharged itself. Yeah. They've gone all electric that recharge the batteries while they're underway. So there are no charging stations. They just show up at the port. They do a loop at the end of Trondheim, or I think it's Sonja Fjord. There's a big hoop, and they just run a ferry back and forth 4 times a day, and it's all electric. They're awesome to look at and fun to ride on, and it's all electric, and it recharges itself. So when we talk about hammering the grid, there's reasons I'm against this stuff, just so the public knows, and so you all know I'm not against you. And I know there's technology out there. I've read reports. I agree with Mr. Watkins. The problem with hydrogen, it's a very inefficient fuel. That's why you have to compress it down so freaking tight and create a bomb. It's not a fuel, so it can act like a fuel. The other thing I read about is we're talking about, there's areas where we're okay with natural gas and compressed natural gas somewhere in one of our reports, but your president doesn't think natural gas is a good thing. So where are we at? Like, what's the truth? Is it good or is it not? So these are the philosophical problems I have with some of these reports. And so I'm going to continue on the track that I think we're getting forced to do some things that in 10 years, we're going to look back and go, what the heck were we thinking? But we spent $100 billion of taxpayer dollars doing something that most of us or some of us don't believe in. Whether I'm right or wrong, maybe I'll be proved I'm wrong in 10 years, but
You've already been proven right.
Right in the moment, I'm pretty sure I'm right. So with that, that's my input. There is technology already out there to do that. And by the way, if a hydrogen fueling station was would actually pencil and not need to be subsidized by the taxpayer, one of these fueling companies that's local would have already built it. So
Maybe
what we're doing is we're voting to subsidize another thing with taxpayer dollars. That's the truth. You don't have to like it, but we build this, we'll go after some grant that will then operate it. And RABA wants to operate it. I don't think a transit agency should be operating a fuel station. I think it's outside of the wheelhouse, so I have reasons for my.
Well,
no
if they're
vote that
gonna
go
have, if they're
far
gonna have
beyond.
hydrogen running buses, I don't wanna pay somebody else to fill it up.
But they'd have to build it.
Well, then that's what the funding is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they would
So
use
the
privately earned profits to create the fuel, build the fuel station, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayer because they're gonna pay to build it and they're gonna pay to operate it. That's the truth. You don't have to like it, but is what will happen with this hydrogen fuel station. That's what's gonna happen. We're gonna build it and then we're gonna have to fund the operation of it, and that's gonna come out of the taxpayer dollars. But guess what? Everybody in this room is gonna fund that.
No, Newsom's gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
He's got to.
So I'm
Okay.
sorry, that's just my 2 cents and.
For the record, I appreciate your comments. I do. I always
Thank
do, Michael. But at the moment, I need a motion to approve staff's recommendations 1 through 4.
Is there no public comment on this?
Yeah, no. Let him speak.
You can speak.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is it public comment? Yeah. Okay, and I just like to say, in terms of hydrogen, I said before, nothing wrong with appropriate technology. If you want to use it to fly a plane, if you wanted to drive a bus nonstop to Los Angeles from Reading, yes, you would want possibly a hydrogen station. But for that little run to Sacramento, you're talking about the salmon runner, look around you. That's electricity. It's everywhere already. You've already got the infrastructure. These buses are stopping every 40 miles. It's the perfect setup for an electric bus, and it's the absolute worst proposal for a hydrogen bus. So if the whole point that I said last time, you're a regional transportation authority. Hydrogen is great stuff, but has nothing to do with regional transportation for the type of distances that you folks are interested in, including Sacramento or Vacaville. That's all.
Thank you. Back to the motion. Do I have a motion to approve staff's recommendation?
I'll make a motion.
First from Ms. Audette, second?
Very brave. Good job.
I'll make the second. Now I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
We have 1, 2, 3.
Opposed.
I'll oppose.
Do you have alternative for them?
Can we repeat, Chairman?
Why don't you have a roll call vote, Amy?
Yeah,
Give them
let's,
Amy, we're gonna have to do a roll call vote on this.
yeah.
Are there more
Sounds good.
than one item we're
Chair-
approving?
We're approving to authorize the executive director to submit the Senate Bill 125 short-term capital program initial allocation package of projects totaling $17 million plus. Item number 2, authorize the executive director to make a minor administrative amendments as appropriate in response to the Cal STA comments or provide any other necessary information in support of the initial allocation package. Item number 3, delegate the executive director to execute the necessary agreements with Cal STA to receive the funds. And number 4, approve and authorize the executive director to execute an interagency agreement attached to the staff report between CERTA and RABA for the purpose of jointly developing and building a hydrogen station on the property owned by RABA. That's what we're approving.
I mean, we,
Yes.
May I provide a comment?
Yes.
Okay, so before we move forward, I think a couple of things, and I understand some of the board's concerns on the hydrogen side. I do want to give a couple of things in perspective. And if the board so chooses, you could look at an alternative to the motion if you still want to remove the hydrogen aspects. The hydrogen, one thing I want to remind the board is that both RABA and CERTA have gone through developing zero emission transition plans. One of the other aspects related to that is the fact that RABA themselves have identified in their own separate transition plan a plan to move a number of vehicles to hydrogen fuel cell, at least in terms of the larger fixed route buses, which are an 8th and 9th generation vehicles. More and more transit agencies are finding the need to, although not always is easily desired is to have to be able to have their own fueling stations related to those vehicles. And many of the transit agencies across the state, both large, medium, and even looking at small, at least especially on the fixed route side, are looking at the need to, based upon at least current technologies, having a balance between both battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell zero emission technologies within their fleets. The one benefit that we have with this money is that it does provide us an opportunity to have some of those funds available that over time we can look at the feasibility and the possibility of being able to have a station that would support both RABA operations in the future, as well as support inner city transportation, as the state has made that a priority themselves. Barring that, if we don't have, we have funds available now. We have 9 million from the state, and we have this SB 125 funds available as match that is required. If we don't do that, we're back to square zero on that side of things for RABA and our regional partners. There's also an opportunity that regional partners, fleets of our local governments, including Caltrans, cities and county, and others, including potentially law enforcement, could look at hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as part of that transition over time. This is a long-term approach and it's phased, but we need to be able to make certain steps forward, and this money is allowing us to evaluate that and the feasibility of what can be done without having to use local funds now today or in the future. I just provide that in terms of a perspective of the opportunity that we do have to explore this. It's not like we're saying, hey, tomorrow we're going to build a hydrogen station. We're going to take steps right now to identify what's an appropriate approach to do so, whether that might even be like a mobile refueler or some other option. We know that there in the future are anticipated local, more local sources of hydrogen fuel from biomass and other efforts, both within Tehama County and in Oroville. So I just provide that in terms of context. If the hydrogen item is still of concern, the other thing I'll add is that we potentially may lose these funds. They have to be obligated to 9 million by September of next year. That requires a number of study elements for conceptual design and some environmental review, that our goal was to utilize these SB 125 funds for that rather than using any of our local funds that we have for FDA funds and others. So that was part of one of the goals in working with RABA in that context, at least within the next year to 2 years. If the board so chooses and is not in favor of the hydrogen project effort, you could also determine to modify and recommend all the rest of the projects minus the hydrogen, and we would have to figure out what those steps would be. I would recommend not doing so. I think at this point it would behoove us, because funds are already provided, to continue to move forward with the hydrogen effort. But I have said my piece there, and I'll let you decide how you'd like to move forward.
So Dan.
I just want to, I mean, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but we actually had a presentation of how we wanted to move forward to meet these requirements. And we looked at do you want to do electric or do you want to do hydrogen? Do you remember we had that whole presentation and we chose to pursue the hydrogen? That's what we voted on. And now here's the allocation and the funding for it. Whether or not we think, because the viability of those big electric buses getting to Bernie or getting to these places it couldn't bring the charge, would not be there. It wouldn't travel as far as we needed it to travel. So we looked at all of this and determined, if we're going to invest the funds that they're providing and we have to do that, then as an alternative, which one did we want to do? Did we want to invest in electric or did we want to invest in hydrogen? So this isn't like, hey, we think hydrogen's a great idea. We got the presentation of which one do you want to invest in, because these are the two that are available. Which one do you want to explore? Because right now they're providing funds to that end, and on the other side, now we're looking at, can we, when or could we purchase hydrogen buses? But again, this is like initial steps. So I understand, I don't want either, but this is the course that they're going on. These are the requirements that we're trying to fulfill. We voted to actually pursue the hydrogen station. So it seems odd to now vote against what we asked them.
Well, you said it. You just said it. Like, it's like, you want to get poked in the left eye, you want to get poked in the right eye. So I want to get poked in either eye, but I guess I'll pick an eye. And I think.
Well, the state is asking us to do this. So it's either going to come out of our money, which goes to roads, or it's going to come out of their money that's determined for this.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. But I think part of it is what we just talked about, and I think part of this goes in lines with what we're talking about with our budget deficit and where this is spiraling down to. At what point does this board finally just say, you know what, maybe we have had enough with some of this, and what can we do within reason?
But yes, let's just go that route, okay? If we do this feasibility study and we do all this work, preliminary work, and we have it in our budget, this 9 million, and we start to do these feasibilities, and it's determined it is not feasible, there isn't the bus, there isn't everything, at least we determine that and we have the data to give the state. If we do nothing, they just say we're out of compliance. And now we're left having to use funds that should be going to something else. So at least if we do go in this direction, we can actually get data to say this does, like, we've done the feasibility, we've gone and looked where we, you know, whatever it is that is or isn't going to work, it is a fuel, it's not a fuel, all that stuff, we actually can pursue that and have data for that.
But that work is already.
No, it's not being done.
Well, it's not being done, but we already have, we already know what the result's going to be with that.
Do we?
I mean, I think.
I don't think we know.
I don't
that
think
yet.
we know that.
I don't think we know that.
And
yet.
either
I think
we're
that
gonna pay for it out of funds that we would want to go to something else, or we're gonna use the money that they're giving us to, you know, at least begin to look at if it is or is not going to work.
The technology is changing, and to pass this up is going to put us behind the 8 ball when we finally have to do something about it. We threw away $17 million that, you know, right, we study it and we figure out if it's the right thing for this area geographically, and with our diverse climate that we've got. I think it's hindsight. It's.
Yeah. We have a distance.
Go ahead, Greg.
Sean, I had a question on the hydrogen station. Is it possible, instead of RABA building this, that a private sector could build it? If hydrogen's the future and line trucks and other things are going to have to use hydrogen, maybe it shouldn't be a RABA-built station. So could we go forward with 1, 2, and 3 and pursue options to get a hydrogen station that is funded by the private sector?
So I'll first add, and I think John Ando should also provide some additional supporting information on research he's been doing. But what I have seen so far is that while there has at least been one inquiry by a vendor that might be interested, their biggest question is, when are those vehicles going to be available? What does the demand look like? That is one major question they've asked on a station perspective to look at that. The potential vendor also, in the conversation I've had so far, has been more focused on the freight and heavy duty side rather than the public transit side, given what they've looked at. The other aspect I would add, and this is where I'd like John to add clarification, is one of the thoughts as part of the feasibility study is to look at whether a private vendor actually could provide a turnkey approach where maybe RABA just provides the property and they actually then build and provide the station and manage it on behalf of RABA. John, do you have anything else to add to Mr. Watkins' question?
Yes, Mr. Tejan, as well as Mr. Mayor Watkins. The intent of evaluating the turnkey approach is to bring in the private sector. RABA is not going to be in the business of constructing a station. We would go out through a procurement process that's compliant with the Federal Transit Administration to select a private vendor who would then in turn, using those funds from the state and the federal government to pay to build that station that they would operate on our behalf and then allow us to fuel the buses based on our zero emissions plan, as well as CERTA's zero emissions plan. This is a common approach that some of the larger transit agencies are doing so that they're not in the business of building and owning a hydrogen station per se. And under the FTA procurement rules, this approach would be allowable with these funds if we move them over to FTA, which is the intent of the overall agreement.
So is it best for this hydrogen facility to be on RABA property? You're talking about, contracting with a private entity to build it. Why build it on RABA property when maybe it would also be fueling freight trucks in the future?
So under the FTA rules, the station would still be owned by RABA. It'll just be operated by this private vendor. We can get FTA approval to allow for the incremental the incidental use of the station by selling the fuel, which the private vendor would do on our behalf, to city governments, county governments, private fleet owners, which would then generate revenue that can go back into supporting not only paying for the station, but also supporting the transit operation. Putting it on RABA property makes it more efficient because we have the land already for the sole purposes of expanding for bus parking as well as fleet fueling infrastructure. But two, we don't have to deal with environmental land acquisition costs, which means that there's more funding to ensure that we can construct the right station that makes sense to be managed by a turnkey operator.
Can we approve 1, 2, and 3, and you can bring 4 back with a more detailed plan as to options, whether RABA builds it, whether it be on RABA property, or whether it be an independent one that could also serve freight trucks on I-5?
To be perfectly honest, Mr. Watkins and the board, these funds are meant to help us do that. Without approval from the board, RABA would have to see what other funds we might actually have that's available. But if we don't do that with these funds today, or really actually based upon FTA input through the process, if we don't include this for now, I am concerned we will lose all the funds we have available and we would have to fork it out later potentially. But the SB 125 funds and the funds that the state provided us would allow us to explore the feasibility over the next year or two. So it's not a turnaround process at this moment. It's going to take us some time.
I just also want to add with one comment too, that FTA has made it clear to us that if we're going to flex these funds over to FTA, we have to have our grant basically done by June so that it could be approved by them by July, because they close the grant system in August. And if we don't make those timelines, then as Sean mentions, those funds will lapse and we'll lose that $9 million. So timing is of the essence at this point. Doesn't mean we have to commit to building anything. The ultimate goal is to just get the money into a FTA grant and we can lay out the foundation for the next steps while we go through that effort.
So if it gets in a grant, could we take that grant and still build it on private property elsewhere? I didn't hear the answer.
That would depend on the grant program if they're going to allow that. I am not aware of too many different grants that allow you to necessarily do that. Some may, but we would have to spend time reviewing, applying for grants to find the right partner where that might be allowed.
John?
Just to comment, the RABA stands to lose this money now. The concerns are, hey, this is a waste of money. Could be. I mean, these goals that were achieved, no one's ever said they're attainable. And, we're going to be, somebody makes up a date. By that date, we're going to be free of gasoline or petroleum fuel. That's not a result of any study. But what's here now is money that's going to be used, whether we use it or somebody else, it's going to be used to these goals. If this agency doesn't use it, somebody else is going to do it. So the idea, I think, here would be to use, whether it's good, better, and different, it's not our money, but we could use it. Maybe the end goal is never achievable, but we could certainly use it to our advantage and keep ourselves flexible in the long run.
I guess I look at
Mr.
it.
Jones?
So our ridership has been falling, and here we're spending tens of millions of dollars more. So we're pushing a Bay Area concept in a very rural area for things that the majority of us don't want. So at some point, what do you say? I mean, if everybody continues to say yes, then these things are pushed upon every region. Somebody's got to say no at some point, and maybe others would as well. And so it's phenomenal, because you would never see anything like this in the private sector, spending tens of millions of dollars more where your ridership is dropping consistently. People are in this area moving away from public transportation, and here we're spending, we're going to be at an all-time high. Fare box ratio doesn't even mean anything anymore. And so it's hard to accept spending so much amount of money for so little gain in the end to satisfy the state.
Well, if you look at RABA's statistics, our ridership is up.
Oh, up over COVID era.
No, it's up over what it was before COVID. The free time that we had this summer skewed the numbers, but we're better today than we were a year ago. And what I see is, there's a lot of people that can't drive, can't afford a car, and you're going to lose the service to Bernie. Electric buses in the wintertime aren't going to make it up there.
Right.
And that's a problem. And eventually the diesel buses are going to go away. So if you can accept that, then we need to prepare for that and that infrastructure. And these electric buses, they're not the panacea everybody thinks they are. You want to get on an electric bus and go to Sacramento, you're going to stop somewhere and sit for a while they charge. It's the same problem we're having with these Teslas now. We got to stop. In other words, well, we got to stop the Tesla here. They're going to come in and shop. No, they don't. They sit in their car and their phone. And time is money for a lot of people. And I think you do a disservice to the people in some of the rural areas. I mean, my God, we got the bus service finally from downtown to the clinic for the VA, and they're using it. We never had it. Now that new clinic's out there. So I think you need to think forward and invest in your infrastructure. I mean, that's why Reading is in such good shape when it comes to our water, because we've invested in our infrastructure. And failing to do that, giving back $17 million, it's going to hurt some people. And I think as a governmental agency, it's incumbent upon us to take care of those that are less fortunate, that can't afford a car or a truck to drive where they want to go, and are incumbent upon the bus. John, for crying out loud, last night I'm driving home and I see him waiting at a bus stop to take the bus, which was going to take him from Enterprise Car Rental downtown to get on another bus, then to go back towards where he lives. That's an hour commute for him every day, either both ways. And for whatever reason, the man does it. So for me,
Job security.
well, it could be. The man walks the walk, though.
Hey.
All right?
Yeah, but there is another alternative.
But Mark, the thing that, well,
Second, Tanessa, go ahead.
okay. The thing that we got to remember is this whole push for hydrogen is predicated on one ideal, that on the salmon runner, electric couldn't make it. They wouldn't let us make a hybrid diesel where you put the 25 horsepower diesel in the back that runs a generator. If we had a hybrid electric bus, it could make it to Bernie. But they said that option's not on the table, can't be considered. So the next only option we can do is they're forcing hydrogen on us here.
Okay,
And I just,
Tanessa? Yeah.
my only concern is that we're gonna pay for this. It's a matter of what pays for it. And so it's not a matter of if, it's when and what are the funds that are gonna pay for it. A lot of the stuff that comes out of Sacramento is unfunded. They mandate things and they don't fund them at all. And it's very frustrating and difficult to figure out budget-wise what's gonna go, because it's just a trade-off. We're creating nothing over here in government. We're just taking money and putting it in different places. So that we've actually got money allocated for this idea that they've come up with now, and this mandate that they're requiring. We went through this process, like the mayor said, we went through this process to figure out, well, what's our best option of all the terrible options? And this is it. So, I mean, it's just the next phase of that. And it just seems if we don't put the money that they're giving us now to invest in this, then it's gonna come out of our pockets, and I don't want us to use road money to pay for this.
And I would tell you that I've had 2 meetings with both Assemblywoman Dolly and Senator Dolly. The state owes the cities and the districts over $1 billion, $1 billion with a B, for mandated programs that they didn't fund. And all I wanted was them to give us that money. And Tanessa is right. For us to to walk away from it now, we're gonna pay for it.
But there is other alternatives. We could have smaller vehicles under the gross vehicle weight that could be diesel. You do not have to go in this direction. And the bigger buses are clearly not being utilized here correctly. So we're just taking the money because we can. There are other methods to do public transportation that would work correctly in this area, and still fall within the state guidelines. And that's a fact.
I agree with that, but
yeah.
can both be true? Because I agree with that 100%.
So do I.
So can both be true?
Let's do it right.
But there is no alternative to taking it. It's not taking it or taking it, and then we are gonna have to fund out of other funds a station or something to comply with these things.
We would have to fund those smaller vehicles.
Well, we are, and that's fine. We can
that's
do that
more-
too. These are not the funds that are allocated to that.
Enough for those smaller vehicles to take care of what transit needs that we have here. This is a big city, Bay Area type mentality being forced on rural California. And at some point, you're gonna have to say no.
Wait, is that, can I get a point of clarification? He's saying that the 9 million could be used to just buy other buses, is that right? And then we don't have to comply with the rest of this?
Or
As far as having another,
buy a ferry, because it says you
can we buy a ferry instead of to,
So
Now,
Sacramento.
stay on track.
there are a number of eligible different activities within SB 125 funds that are available. There are a number of projects that were looked at and don't really seem eligible. We don't really have ferry service here, as that one is one that's identified. The 9 million that we were provided. The 9 million that we were provided related to the hydrogen station is only being provided by the state of California through CalSTA, and it is federal funds that the federal agencies have already collected and is making available. It's true that if we don't move forward with it, the state can then reallocate to another region. Someone else will use the funds that's already been collected in terms of that process related to those funds.
we can't use them to buy other vehicles, smaller vehicles?
The 9 million that was awarded to us was specifically to support a hydrogen station. That is the only allocation the state utilized that and allocated it for. I would say that if we were to say no, they will take it back and they will not reallocate it. It was a discretionary decision by CalSTA to be able to provide those funds to support stuff here on the
So
North
there's
State.
nothing else we can do with it.
With
I believe
related,
John Ando would like to address the board again.
yes,
John,
let me
go
just-
ahead and unmute.
Yes, Sean is exactly correct in what he's saying. I believe it was Mr. Jones's comment on smaller vehicles. It is RABA's plan to downsize the fleet, to get away from larger vehicles and start using smaller vehicles. But I still need to preface that even as a public transit operator, we're not exempt from the innovative clean transit rule. We still have to buy zero emission vehicles, which is why on the SB 125 list, you'll see that we're pursuing smaller buses and smaller vans to still comply with that rule. We're still also going to be in a situation, particularly with Bernie, with routes going to Shasta Lake and routes going to Anderson. Even if we do get small vehicles, which is our plan, we're going to need hydrogen for those vehicles because battery electric is just not going to work, and it's just going to add more travel time to the routes, thus making the system inefficient and people won't use the system. So I just want to preface that we are getting smaller vehicles, but we still have to comply with the CARB rule, regardless if they're small or large.
Again, it absolutely is insane.
Yes.
The amount of money you're going to spend to do one route to Bernie when the private sector can already get it done cheaper. It makes no sense. It really doesn't.
And can I ask a clarifying financial question and maybe, so we've got a $21,534,812 number, part of that, and a $9 million number. Those are two different numbers, or is that combined?
No, correct. So what this is just for is the allocation of the 21.5 million of this. Everything except for roughly just over 4 million is being presented as part of this initial allocation package. A number of these projects are multi-year projects. RABA is looking at this.
So hold on, Sean, hold on. That's just, sorry, dude, I really don't like interrupting you. I'm asking a simple question. Is the 9 million that we're concerned about in the 21 or outside of the 21?
It is outside the 21
outside
million.
The 21. Okay, so what I think I'm looking at $2.129 million to leverage 9 million.
Correct.
We're not going to give up the 21 million. And for clarification, there is no hydrogen equipment in this list that we're going to be spending. It kind of fascinates me that that's the case, because if we're really going to spend what will end up being 11 million and change on a hydrogen station, and we're forced to buy hydrogen vehicles when we don't even know if that's going to work. We don't know that that will work. We don't know that hydrogen will make it to Bernie and back, because the hydrogen trash truck barely makes it out to Millville and back. It's a really slow go. If you get caught behind that clean burning, clean energy rig, it's painful. So we don't, I mean, there's just, for me personally, I would reallocate the $2 million on the hydrogen to something else. I'm not, everybody in the county now knows I don't like electric vehicles, but I mean, there's a part of me that's not sure we should spend the 9 million on something that we don't even know if the RABA property could do it. We don't have that information. I haven't seen anything that says we can actually build a station on that particular property. You've got residential right next door. You've got a RABA, you've got.
I'm at the RABA meeting Monday night. We're going to talk about it.
I'll actually be there. But my point is, we don't know that we can even do it there. So, I'm not so concerned about giving up the 9 million.
We've already had that discussion, and we can build that hydrogen station on the RABA property. If we couldn't, Sean and John.
Are we?
I will
sure
defer.
That we can build a hydrogen fueling station on that property, Sean.
That's the part of the.
Didn't we already take a vote?
No, you got 500,000 recommend and do a market study.
I think they got this.
Oh, it was no.
Yeah, that's what we always do. We spend thousands of dollars to studying. And I love the consultants. I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying, it's like, wait a minute, we are cart before the horse here.
The $9 million, they're telling us what we can do with that money, right, Sean?
Correct. Well, they have provided it for the purpose in which they inquired about based upon prior discussions related to the intercity salmon runner service.
Yeah, the federal government threw
Just use it as a carrot to
out there to spread around
manipulate people where they want us to end up in 2 or 3 years. So that's all it is. It's just a total
Yes.
science project.
You also have to remember, though, that they can do that without giving you the money. Like they're doing it with, with our waste, with waste. They determined that you can no longer put it in a landfill. They gave you no money to pay for infrastructure to change how you're doing that. And so they can still say, hey, guys, you all have to do this.
The first one failed, so you could do another.
But here's my question to the board. When we voted for electric versus hydrogen, when we did that, if it was a no at that point, then they could have gone back to the drawing board to figure out another option. Seems odd that we asked them to go to do the hydrogen route, and now that it's here and we got the money and everything, we're saying no.
Well,
Seems like a bait and switch.
You feel like that this is like we're doing a bait and switch?
Yeah.
Well, to me, I'll tell you why, for whatever it's worth, is I feel like now that as a supervisor going through AB 205 and the Fountain Wind stuff, seeing the governor's bang up job on the budget and just seeing in the last 60 days how much we've continued to like rapidly circle the drain. I'm just like, you know what? I've had it. I've had it with being manipulated by the federal and state government saying, we know what's best. And then they're going to give us this money. Like we should be happy that they're throwing us some crumbs to just keep us busy. And then meanwhile, we're going to go down this road that's not going to improve Shasta County at all.
Okay, John.
That's me. I mean, seriously.
Chair Misano, I move that we
Wants to make an alternate motion.
approve staff recommendations 1, 2, and 3 at this point.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion to approve 1, 2, and 3 by Mr. Watkins and a second
By Audette.
Ms. Audette. So now I'll call for the vote. That takes priority over the first motion.
I just want to make sure, can we clarify what we're not doing with number 4?
We're not
What we
approving
are
it.
doing with number 4?
We're not approving it at this time.
Okay.
We're specifically approving 1, 2, and 3.
Does he have to include in that motion what to do with 4?
No.
If there's an alternative,
Come back with,
we're gonna come back to it?
We can bring it, we can ask staff to bring it back. So there's a motion and a second. Do you get that, Amy? All right. Now I'll take the vote. All in favor of approving 1, 2, and 3?
aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We'll deal with 4 on another day.
What are we gonna do with?
Vote on it today.
I'd like to know what we're doing with 4.
I wouldn't pass.
Well, but they could at least have it.
What would you offer as an alternative, Patrick?
I'm not interested in hydrogen. I'm lukewarm on electricity.
Here's what I would recommend. I would recommend that we have staff bring it back with alternatives.
And hell, I'd buy 20 ferries and run people down.
We don't have enough water for ferries. Oh, yeah.
Can I,
And that's green. You put them in a ferry, that actually is green.
can I seek
A
guidance?
brilliant idea. That's as good as the governor's ever had.
Can I seek clarification from the board on an item related to the emotion? Mr. Watkins, does your motion include, though, still providing the 2.129 million for the hydrogen efforts as part of the allocation package, or are you wanting to propose that we remove that? Because based upon discussion and the fact that you're not wanting to approve action item number 4,
What I was asking.
I wanted to make sure I had clarification of what you're including. So I make sure staff also doesn't include something in an allocation package that is due by December 31st to the state for the other elements.
I would think that the amount there that is being funded to go with 4 would not be prudent to advance it if there's no item 4.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we clarify that the motion proposed for items 1 through 3 is to improve the initial allocation package minus what would be called the expansion of cycle 3 TRCP for North State Intercity Bus to Rail, which includes both the hydrogen station match.
Which is 2.1 million, right?
Yep, and the hydrogen
2.129.
station market study. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I got that clarification so my staff can move forward with the approved elements.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
What are
Chair.
the consequences of not approving the, other than we don't have, we're not gonna move towards a hydrogen station? What other consequences will we have at the state level for compliance, for regulation, for all that kind of stuff by not approving, having a plan for an alternative fuel source for alternative vehicles for zero emissions? Like what other consequences do we need to be aware of? And then I'm asking that so that I know, like, do we then have you bring it back? Cause we're gonna have to come up with something else, or what's the plan?
I will have to discuss with both the executive officer and the transit manager of RABA. The one item I do see as a potential impact to RABA right now is they may have to reevaluate their short range transit plan in terms of assumptions related to any hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in the future, at least in terms of any regional support funding through SB 125 or in the 9 million match towards the station. That will impact any estimates that they have, and they might have to make some adjustments for their final plan. The other side I could see is the state may be less than generous in future discussion should we change our mind, as we are required to move towards a zero emission public transit fleets. But that's more anecdotal on my mind.
So these other things we passed, the sustainable strategies and regional transportation plans, these did not include a hydrogen station. Are we gonna have to reevaluate all of these because of our goals being met by having a hydrogen station? Is this gonna affect all of these plans too that we just passed?
In the short term for Shasta Connect side for the services, the rural services, the initial plan was already to purchase regular gasoline vehicles through 2029. 2030, 100% has to be zero emission. Our initial recommendations was to look at zero emission battery electric vehicles because that's what's available in those vehicle classes. And there's nothing in the hydrogen fuel cell side in those smaller class vehicles at the moment that is available. They're in beta testing essentially with different manufacturers to prepare those.
Because we knew we wouldn't.
So Sean, to clarify though, we're meeting those with electric.
action that we have.
We're meeting zero emission, or we shouldn't approve any of this spending. If this is, if all the electric buses that we're buying, 6 electric vans, 5 30 to 35 foot electric buses,
does that get us
1
there?
electric pilot van, that's zero emission. So we're meeting if that's not meeting the goal going forward, then we shouldn't do that either.
Does
So
that,
we
that
either
helps?
are, to Tanessa's question, whether it's hydrogen or not, we're either meeting it or we're not. So if the electric isn't meeting the requirement of the state to be zero emission by whatever year, 2 years past, 3 years past this particular plan, then we either are meeting it or we're not with what we're moving forward on. But my goodness, we're spending a lot of money on electric. Shouldn't that qualify us?
If this will help us move in that direction, yes. So we will be able to start with this money and with this allocation package and with RABA's intention to look at pursuing additional competitive grant funds to offset and leverage these costs where maybe we might be able to get more vehicles even than what we estimate. That will help us to move in that direction. Without allocating these funds, we can't, and we don't have a plan. And
right, but this we're moving in the direction of zero emission.
Yes,
with
this
electric.
would allow us, correct, this would allow us to move in the direction.
We're compliant.
Yeah.
Correct.
Quote unquote, with the state
Now you like electric.
Nazism that we're being forced to do. So I hate that word, by the way. So there's this reality that before we go off on thinking we're going to get punished, maybe we should look at it as we're actually complying. We're spending a lot of money to comply. We're moving in the direction of zero emission vehicles, which is the mandate. The hydrogen thing is, I think it's a huge distraction. But if it's viable, I'm hearing talk that there's private people going to produce it locally in Tehama County. And I got a feeling if they're going to produce it, they're going to sell it. And so before we launch down this road, and I'm sorry to give up the 9 million, but my goodness, we're way ahead on, I think this whole process has got us way ahead of where we should be when we're talking about taxpayer dollars. I know.
All right.
I always go back to
We've
that.
got a motion, a second, and we voted on it. Let's
So what do
move.
we want to do for 4? What's your recommendation for 4? Do we
I-
bring something back?
I think we asked staff to look at 4 and bring it back.
And I think we ought to be looking at, is there a private sector that would build a hydrogen station?
Do that.
That lets RABA go forward with still their hydrogen concept, but the station is fueled by private industry, if it's really viable.
Yeah, and staff can do that, Sean, right?
Yep, we'll
Okay,
do that.
let's move. Then we'll do that. Bring it back, bring item 4 back, and with a recommendation that addresses the concerns of the board, and we'll move on to number 13.
Is there?
Look at that, they brought it
Michael.
back. Lucky 13.
13, Michael, you're up. Let's go.
Okay, yeah, I drew the short
Guy's
straw
got
on
dinner
this
waiting, he
one.
said.
Can everyone hear me okay and see my presentation?
Go ahead, sir.
Great. Okay. This is item Lucky 13, review and approve preliminary regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year 24-25. Let's see here. The overall work program, the OWP, what is it? Its primary purpose is an application for federal consolidated planning grant funds, also called CPG funds. And it also serves as a contract for state grant funds. It also is used for secondary purposes, including an agency work plan, a tracking tool for directors, and a monitoring tool for local, state, and federal partners, as well as the general public. And the OWP is updated in generally what can be perhaps oversimplified to a 3-part process. In December, we developed the preliminary regional planning priorities, which I will present to you momentarily, and hopefully the board approves them upon review. They may offer suggestions, of course, and edits and whatnot per the staff report. Then we come back in February and incorporating the board's feedback as well as state feedback, we draft work elements and a budget. And then the board reviews again and provides further direction. Then in April, we incorporate the direction again, complete and finalize the overall work program document, which has a narrative portion as well as what are called the work elements, which have all of the numbers which serve as the monitoring tool, and the board adopts the OWP, which is then submitted to the state. So I'd like to talk about the proposed regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Now, this isn't a major change of the work, but it is rephrased in the format of broad goals and focus areas to better align with the requirements that we have to follow for the OWP. And so to kind of illustrate what the priorities are, I'll mention some of the work that we can expect to fall under each priority, but that's actually going to be the next step at the next board meeting where we actually delineate that in full. So the first priority is safety, resiliency, mobility, and efficiency on regionally significant corridors. This includes ongoing work such as the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project and the Envision 273 plan. The next priority is goods and freight movement, and that same with a special focus on goods and freight. The next priority would be data and performance planning. That would include work like the SRTA Regional Data Dashboard. The next priority would be active transportation, and that would be continuing technical support to the local jurisdictions for grant applications. Another priority would be enhanced delivery of public transportation. That could include coordination with RABA in implementing their short-range transit plan, or any number of things. Zero emission vehicle infrastructure planning. That could include the Salmon Runner, electrification. And the priority would be exploration or improve public engagement planning process. Exploration more of reaching a wider representation of residents. So my recommendation to the board is this, that preliminary regional planning priorities for the fiscal year 2024-25. And just as a reminder, these are the proposed.
Thank you, Michael. Questions from the board? Discussion? The chair will entertain a motion to approve item 13.
So moved.
Mr. Jones, second?
I'll second.
Second from Mr. Kellstrom. Jones and Kellstrom, Amy, all in favor on 13? Aye. Opposed?
Yep.
Motion carries unanimous, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Michael, on 13. Item 14, authorize staff to apply for a $700,000 Caltrans grant and the executive director to execute the technical services agreement for the 2024 Regional Active Transportation Program. Keith.
Yep, he's rejoining us, panelists. It'll be just a moment here.
Voters would say you do.
There he is.
Hey, good afternoon. Good to see everyone. Has been assisting local partners to prepare active transportation projects through its regional assistance program for the last 6 years. Normally, CERTA funds this assistance with planning grants and a small amount of matching funds. This strategy has enabled local agencies in the region to secure over $52 million for improvements by investing just over $200,000 in regional planning funds and just over $6.1 million in federal and state funding.
That kind of return?
Available to the region.
All comes out of the same pocket mark, just for the record.
Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you are. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, great.
Sure.
So CERTA wants to continue assisting local agencies and partners to prepare these projects with myriad benefits. However, CERTA was unsuccessful in receiving planning grant funds necessary to sustain the assistance program, largely due to circumstances outside of staff's control. At the CERTA board meeting in August, the board of directors approved $400,000 in CERTA planning funds as a stopgap measure for staff to hire a consultant to continue the program through Active Transportation Program, or ATP, Cycle 7. Fortunately, the adoption of the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan should make a new grant application for planning funds more competitive, and if successful, could help sustain CERTA's ability to assist local partners beyond ATP Cycle 7, including ATP Cycle 8 and other grant programs. Consequently, staff released a request for proposals, or RFP, for consultant assistance with local active transportation project public engagement, preliminary designs, and grant writing with a budget of $400,000 and a potential budget of up to $1.1 million pending, one, CERTA board approval, and two, a Caltrans grant award of $700,000. The RFP was open for 3 weeks, and CERTA received 2 proposals, one from California Consulting and one from Kittleson and Associates, who is proposing working with Mark Thomas and Evan Brooks Associates, or EBA, as subconsultants for engagement and grant writing. 2 other firms expressed interest in applying but did not submit proposals in the end. California Consulting's proposal was unfortunately not responsive to the RFP, as it was submitted late and did not include all of the elements requested in the RFP. A panel comprising representatives from CERTA, Caltrans, Healthy Shasta, and local agencies evaluated the proposal from Kittleson and Associates, as well as their team's interview performance, before arriving at a consensus score of 137 out of 150 points. Overall, the panel was impressed with the proposal and scored well in the individual scoring criteria, including staff qualifications, proposal thoroughness, and the value of services to be rendered. In summary, staff recommends the board of directors authorize the executive director to enter into a technical services agreement with Kittleson and Associates to carry out low stress Shasta for a term ending June 30th, 2027, not exceeding $400,000 or $1.1 million pending a grant award, and authorize staff to apply for a $700,000 Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant to augment low stress Shasta, CERTA's 2024 Regional Active Transportation Assistance Program. I will, at this time, also suggest a minor edit to my own recommendation, and that is to authorize the executive director to enter this technical services agreement and make minor adjustments as may be necessary when we're finishing up the process with Kittleson.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, I had one.
Yeah.
Do you know why the other 2 didn't apply at the end? Or why they didn't submit our, proposals?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. For one of them, I did not get a response, and the other one, I only got a response this morning. And they appreciated the inquiry, but they were, it was a timing issue for them. And also they reached out to Kittleson and Associates to see if they could be a sub on Kittleson's team. However, Kittleson had already set up their team.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve this staff's recommendation on item 14.
With minor adjustments.
Minor adjustments.
I'll second it.
What are the?
Okay, we have Mr. Watkins with a motion and Mr. Jones second. What?
What are the adjustments?
Well, what he talked about that
okay.
John could make minor edits.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Me, I oppose.
Okay.
The fiasco I dealt with the cattle project on these very similar funds in Cottonwood, I oppose.
Okay. Motion carries. One dissenting, Mr. Kellstrom.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Item 15, staff's recommendation that the CERTA chair inquire of any board member, director, members would like to suggest future topics for discussion. Anybody they want to talk about next time?
I'd like to bring back discussion of hydrogen fuel cell technology.
Or any type of infrastructure.
He's kidding. He's kidding.
I have not.
No, we have.
Actually, I think that we could get
A private sector to do
Jeremy
it.
Edwards do a presentation on their fuel cell plan or their hydrogen plan. I think that would be very informative to the board. I don't know if that's a possibility or not.
It's a board thing. Does everybody want to support that recommendation?
Sure.
Patrick?
Fine, we'll put it in red book.
Hawkins? Okay, Sean, we'd like you to, who's it?
Jeremy Edwards from Wind River.
Okay,
Presentation from Reading Rancheria Economic Development Corporation on their project.
yes, Jeremy
Got it.
Edwards.
They're already doing.
Good idea. I need to learn more.
Is it Jeremy Edwards or Jeremy Hayward?
Hayward, I'm sorry.
Jeremy Hayward. Jeremy Hayward. I know the man.
Yep, we'll reach
Okay.
out to them and we'll schedule something for the future.
With that, folks, we are going into closed session, so I have to close this. I've got 6 minutes. Conference call with Sacramento. Okay.
Well, if you could run the meeting a little better, we'd be out of here.
I mean, the town's.
Suppose I gotta leave.
I gotta claim town on that damn
I have to leave now, right?
Cry.
I said you called it.
Cry. He's just
Can't get through.
Which one you sent it to?
Come on, we've got to
Whatever you wrote
move.
down on a piece of paper again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I got it.
Kevin?
Maybe, yes.
We're opening up our closed session.
No, no, well, hold on. Well, here,
You want my email address or phone number?
take my phone number down.
Well, it had no mailbox. It said,
I'll call you. What's your number? Type your number and call me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great work, by the way, on all your stuff in there. That was
Tina,
quite an undertaking.
it was real.
Hi, Tina.
Have we adjourned?
Yeah, we are adjourned here.
No, we haven't.
Wait, we're not adjourned
You
yet.
gotta open, you gotta reconvene. No reportable action, reportable action.
But it's like, hey, I did a video on my Facebook page about today's meeting.
We can hear you. Yes.
All right. So,
And then my.
Reconvening and closing the closed session, and there is no reportable action. Amen.
Adjourn.
Adjourned.
Now we're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.